I never thought that I would find myself in a situation where I would have to change the locks in my own house to keep my sister out. But life can throw up unexpected surprises, especially when it comes to family. I'll start from the beginning. My name is Pamela, and I have an older sister named Sabrina. As a child, Sabrina was always the golden child. She took risks, pursued her dreams, and, as they say, knew how to live life to the fullest. She got married early, gave birth to two beautiful daughters, and inherited our grandmother's house. On the contrary, I followed what my family called the safe path. I worked hard, saved up money, and eventually bought my own house, taking out a mortgage of $100,000 that my grandmother left me as a down payment. "Pamela, you're so boring," Sabrina often said during our family gatherings, leaning back in her chair with a glass of wine in her hand. "All you do is work and pay the bills. Where is your thirst for adventure?" I just shrugged my shoulders. My house might not have been as impressive as her inherited property, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. I had my own routine, peace, and independence. Little did I know that my supposedly boring life was about to turn upside down. It all started about 6 months ago when Sabrina broke into my house one Sunday afternoon. Her eyes were sparkling with excitement. "Pamela, you won't believe what an opportunity I've found," she exclaimed as she barely took off her shoes before rushing into my living room. I was in the middle of my daily weekend cleaning, but I knew that look in her eyes. It was the same look she had when she convinced our parents to let her go camping in Europe at 18, or when she decided to have a wedding in Bali that nearly ruined our parents. "What is it this time?" I asked, putting aside my cleaning supplies. "There's this amazing medical startup," she began, pulling out her phone to show me some fancy presentations. "They are changing the healthcare industry. Tom and I are thinking of selling the house and investing in it. You should do the same." I stared at her, wondering if she was joking. "Sell my house, the one that I'm still paying the mortgage for, to invest in a startup." "Don't be such a cowardly cat," she rolled her eyes. "This is a guaranteed return, 3 times more investments in just 1 year. You could buy an even bigger house after that." "Sabrina, I don't know anything about medical startups or investments," I tried to reason with her, "and I'm perfectly happy with my current home." She looked at me with a mixture of pity and disappointment, which I've gotten used to over the years. "That's why you'll always be stuck in the same place, Pamela. You're afraid to take risks in order to grow. You just stand there." The conversation quickly turned into an argument. Sabrina called me a loser for not jumping at this amazing opportunity. It took me a while to notice the change. At first, it just seemed strange that Sabrina no longer bombarded me with photos of her carefree days on the snow-white sand, no longer sent sarcastic captions designed to remind me how boring my life was, how stupid I was by not investing all my money in this brilliant investment. I thought maybe she was finally tired of trying to make me jealous and decided to just enjoy her new lifestyle without constant proof of her own luck. But something inside me was bothering me, like a premonition, a small voice saying that something was wrong here. Until a few weeks ago, Sabrina was sending 3 or 4 photos a day her daughters building sand castles against the backdrop of azure waves, then gourmet dinners with cocktails and seafood, then pictures of an expensive car they rented because life is too short to drive something mediocre. And now, silence. One evening, almost before going to bed, I picked up my phone and sent my sister a message. "Hi, how are you? I haven't heard anything for a long time." It remained unread. I waited a day, then another, but there was no response. Then I called, but the call was reset after the first ring. My heart sank uncomfortably. I knew Sabrina, if everything was going well for her, she would have been delighted to share it. She would not have let me forget how right her investment was. The following week, I went to my parents' house for dinner again, knowing in advance that a conversation about Sabrina would be inevitable. And indeed, as soon as I crossed the threshold, my mother anxiously said, Have you talked to your sister? I froze while taking off my coat and slowly turned around. No, and what happened? The parents looked at each other, and Dad sighed heavily. We can't reach her either. She hasn't been in touch for 2 weeks now. 2 weeks. It was too long for Sabrina, who was used to broadcasting her life to the world in real time. Maybe she's just having trouble with her phone, I suggested, even though I didn't believe it myself. Or maybe she's enjoying life, Mom shrugged. But there wasn't the same confidence in her voice that she sounded when she admired her eldest daughter's determination. But the very next day, I found out the truth. I was at work when the phone rang from an unknown number. I was waiting for another promotional call, but I reluctantly answered, but Sabrina's worried voice came on the other end. Pamela. Just one word, but there was so much weariness and despair in it, as if she hadn't slept in days. Sabrina, what's wrong with you? Where are you? There was a deep sigh in the receiver. I need help. I felt my heart beat faster. What happened? Where are you? We're not on the coast anymore. The voice was hoarse, broken. We're in some kind of motel. Tom went to get the money, but he didn't come back. For what money? Sabrina, please explain what's going on. She sobbed. It's all gone, Pamela, the startup. It was a scam. We lost all the money. I felt an icy emptiness spreading inside me. How is this a scam? They're gone, Pamela. Her sister's voice was trembling. The whole project, all the founders, they just disappeared. The phones are not answering. The office is empty. Tom was trying to find someone who could help us, but... I closed my eyes, trying to process what was said. Wait, are you saying that you have nothing left at all? Just clothes, a couple of suitcases, and debts. She sobbed again. We mortgaged the car, Tom took out another loan, hoping to invest more and get more. And now we owe the bank. I bit my lip to keep from saying something harsh. She took a deep breath. Where are you now? In some cheap motel 40 miles from the coast. We have almost no money left, even for food. My heart sank. Despite all the anger, despite the endless warnings she ignored, she was still my sister. I'll be there. I hung up the call, grabbed my keys, and ran out of the office. Thousands of thoughts were spinning in my head. I should have seen this coming. I should have been more persistent. I should have. But now it was too late. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the irritation that was growing in me every day as my house slowly, but surely turned into a chaotic dormitory for Sabrina, her husband, and their endless guests. When I agreed to let them in, I really hoped that, having found herself in a difficult situation, Sabrina would finally understand that in life you can't rely only on risk and luck, that there are times when you just need to pull yourself together and start from scratch. I expected that the very next day after moving in, they would go looking for work, that they would have a plan, at least some kind of strategy. But instead, my evenings turned into noisy gatherings, loud laughter, clinking glasses, and snacks scattered on the floor, which I had to clean up. We need to relax, Sabrina explained nonchalantly when I found them having wine and talking to some new couple who were sitting on my couch as if at home. We've been through a lot of stress, Pamela. You can't imagine what it's like to lose everything you had. I gritted my teeth, looking at the bottle of expensive wine that I was sure was bought with my money. Recently, they began to forget to go to the store more and more often, and the refrigerator, which I filled every week, emptied twice as fast as usual. Sabrina, you said you'd be looking for a job, I reminded her, folding my arms across my chest. She rolled her eyes and waved her hand. I just need to come to my senses a little bit now. I left the room in silence, because I knew that if I continued the conversation, I would not be able to restrain myself. Another week has passed. Sabrina and Tom were in no hurry. They spent their days browsing the internet for some dubious jobs, but they didn't respond to any of them. Their explanations were different. The salary was too small, the schedule was inconvenient, and the work did not match their level. "We can't just go to work at a cafe or a store, Pamela," Sabrina complained, sitting in the kitchen and idly flipping through the pages of her laptop. "We've always been doing something more serious. We need something promising." I clenched my fists, reminding myself that I had promised to be patient for 3 months. But then the bills started coming in. My monthly electricity bill has doubled. The same thing happened with the water. Sabrina took baths almost twice a day, and Tom left the lights on in all the rooms, even if he was in one. I started noticing that my credit card was being used for purchases that I hadn't made. At first, it was small items, groceries, household chemicals, but then I saw a receipt for several $100s from a clothing store. I bumped into Sabrina in the kitchen when she was sorting through bags of new clothes as if nothing had happened. "Did you use my card?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She didn't even look up. "Pamela, don't make a tragedy out of this. We're your family. I just borrowed a little bit. I'll pay it back as soon as we figure it out." "On loan. Sabrina, you didn't even ask. This is called stealing." She snorted. "Oh my God, come on. I told you I'd give it back. You're so afraid of spending money that you've already forgotten that money is necessary for life." I took a deep breath so I wouldn't say something I'd regret later. "Sabrina," I said slowly and clearly, "you have 1 month left." She looked at me with feigned surprise, as if she didn't understand what I was talking about. "1 month, and I want you to start looking for an apartment." "Pamela," she sighed and rolled her eyes, but I wasn't listening anymore. "I'm tired. I'm tired of working to support 3 more adults, tired of coming home and seeing a complete mess, tired of hearing Sabrina bully me and then take money from me without even asking." I thought it couldn't get any worse, but then the collectors came. I returned home late at night, tired after a long day, when I saw a black car outside my house. 2 men in formal suits were standing at the door, and inside, through the window, I noticed Sabrina, pale as a sheet. "How can I help you?" I asked, coming closer. One of the men, a tall man with sharp eyes, looked at me and took a notebook out of his pocket. "Are you Pamela Clark?" I nodded. "We're looking for your sister. She owes a large sum." "Pamela," Sabrina murmured from behind me. I slowly turned to her. "How much?" She pressed her lips together, not answering, but the man continued. $50,000. My heart started pounding in my ears. "What?" "They couldn't pay the loan they took for the last investment," the second man explained, "and the bank transferred the debt to us." I turned back to Sabrina, and for the first time in months, I saw fear in her eyes. "Did you take out a loan?" I asked, feeling my voice break. "I thought I could pay it off, if everything worked out." Her voice was trembling. I closed my eyes, trying to collect my thoughts. They couldn't stay, that was clear. "You will have to leave my house," I said, opening my eyes and looking directly at Sabrina. "Pamela, please." "Tomorrow." I didn't shout anymore, I didn't explain. I just stated the fact. I walked past her into the house, leaving her on the threshold where she stood with her head down. I was in pain, but I knew there was no other way. I sat in the kitchen surrounded by bills, trying to concentrate, but the numbers were dancing in front of my eyes, adding up to frighteningly large amounts that I couldn't afford. Every month, my budget became more and more strained, and it became more and more difficult to save money, as bills for water, electricity, and heating increased at an alarming rate. I've never had financial problems. I'm used to calculating everything in advance, always saving for a rainy day. But now, with 4 extra people in the house, my stability has crumbled like a house of cards. I took a deep breath, and tried to calm down. "Sabrina," I called, feeling the restrained irritation in my voice. A minute later, she appeared in the kitchen, holding a phone in one hand and a cup of expensive organic coffee in the other, which I definitely did not buy. "What is it? What is it?" she asked absently, continuing to type something on her phone. "We need to have a serious conversation." I tapped the bills spread out in front of me. "Do you see these numbers? These are utility bills. They've tripled since you moved in." She glanced at the papers, frowned, but immediately waved her hand. "Oh, of course, it's a house. More people live in it, it's natural." I gritted my teeth. "Sabrina, do you even understand that I can't continue to pay for all this alone? I can barely handle my mortgage myself." She put the cup down on the table and folded her arms across her chest. "Well, tell me what you need," she said with a hint of irritation. "I need you and Tom to start paying your share," I replied firmly. Her eyebrows shot up, as if I'd offered her something outrageous. "Wait, do you want me to pay for living in my own sister's house?" I closed my eyes and counted slowly to 5 before opening them again. "Yes, Sabrina. Because you're not just a guest, you live here, use all the resources, buy expensive groceries, call a taxi, as if it doesn't cost money." "I can't believe you're really demanding money from me," she shook her head, looking at me as if I'd just betrayed our sisterly bond. "That's so low." I stood up, gathered the bills into a pile, and took a deep breath. "Good. If you don't want to pay, then you have 2 options. Either you start saving money for rent and looking for a place to live, or—" "Or what?" she interrupted, crossing her arms over her chest. I looked her straight in the eye. "Either you leave." There was a heavy silence in the room. Sabrina looked at me, her lips trembling with indignation, but she remained silent. "I'm not kidding," I added, retreating to the refrigerator so I wouldn't feel my anger simmer. "There is no more time to rock up. I gave you 3 more months, even though I shouldn't have." "We can't just move out," she muttered. "You don't understand how difficult it is." I almost laughed. It's hard to work every day, come home and find guests you don't even know sitting on my couch. It's hard to pay for 5 people while 2 adults act like they have endless vacations. Sabrina jumped to her feet, anger flashing in her eyes. "You've always been like this. What is it?" she exclaimed. "So correct, so calculating, cold. I've never been able to just relax and trust in life." I shook my head. "No, Sabrina, I just learned to be responsible for my actions. But you don't." She opened her mouth, but then Tom came into the room, holding a bottle of wine in his hands. "Hey, what's going on here?" I turned to him. "Do you want to know? Great. Starting tomorrow, you will start paying some of the bills, or find a place to live." Tom frowned. "Oh, come on, Pamela. Don't be so tough." "Tough?" I couldn't help but laugh. "It would be tough to just kick you out right now." I waited, hoping that Sabrina would finally understand the gravity of the situation. But instead, she silently turned around and left the room, slamming the door. She didn't talk to me the next day. Tom also avoided making eye contact with me, and the girls felt the tension in the house and were quieter than usual. But after a few days, Sabrina changed tactics. She waited until I got home from work, deliberately choosing a moment when I was already tired and dreamed only of hot tea and peace. "Pamela," her voice was soft, conciliatory, the way it was when she was a child, when she wanted me to cover for her in front of her parents. I looked up. "What?" She tilted her head to the side and smiled apologetically. "I thought maybe you were right. We should be grateful for your help." I tensed up. I knew Sabrina too well. "Good." She carefully sat down in front of me, folded her hands on the table. "It's just, we don't have much money right now, you know. We are ready to pay, but maybe we will start with a small amount first, and then when things get better. I closed my eyes. Sure, of course she would say that. Sabrina, I said, looking her straight in the eye. Either you start paying your share or you leave. She sighed. Is that your last word? Yes. She nodded slowly. Okay. I watched her leave, and for the first time in all this time, I felt that maybe the situation had really moved on. But I was wrong. The next morning, when I was getting ready to leave for work, I discovered that my key no longer fits the lock. I stared at her in disbelief. Sabrina was really laughing, her shoulders were shaking, and there was amusement in her eyes, as if I'd just told a particularly funny joke. Tom, sitting next to her, grinned and shook his head like I was a kid who said he was going to build a rocket in his backyard. Oh, Pamela, you can't be serious, Sabrina repeated, finally stifling her laughter. Where should we go? We still don't have enough money to rent decent housing. You don't want your nieces to stay outside, do you? I felt something snap inside of me. It's not my responsibility, Sabrina, I said slowly, trying to control myself. You're an adult. You're a mother. You knew you had 6 months to get back on your feet, and you didn't do anything to change the situation. Tom sighed heavily, leaned back on the couch and reached for the TV remote control, as if the conversation had already lost all interest for him. Listen, Pamela, let's not be dramatic. We're a family. Do you really want to kick us out? I gritted my teeth. Yes, I do. They seemed impressed by my confidence. Sabrina stopped smiling, and Tom looked up from the TV and stared at me with unexpected attention. You're really serious, the nurse finally said. Yes, Sabrina, I'm serious. I looked straight at her without blinking. You have a week. Her face contorted. You just can't turn us out like that. I can, and I will. You know we won't find an apartment in a week, she said, her voice trembling with indignation. Then you should have started looking earlier. She jumped to her feet, waving her arms angrily. I can't believe it. I thought you were my sister, and you're making us look like outsiders. Sabrina, you're an outsider. You and your family are living in MY house, and I'm not going to take it anymore. Tom snorted loudly. You know, Pamela, we thought that you would help like a normal family, but you're acting like we're your enemies. You're my enemies if you think you can take over my house and live on my money, I said in a flat voice. Sabrina opened her mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. I'm changing the locks tomorrow. You have a week to find a place to live and leave here. I turned around and left the living room, not listening to their outraged cries. The next day, I actually called the foreman and replaced the locks. Tom and Sabrina were furious. They tried to challenge my decision, but I was adamant. They left a week later. I don't know where exactly, and I didn't ask. For the first time in a long time, the house became quiet. I sat down on the couch, closed my eyes, and allowed myself a smile. Finally, I waited, sitting on the couch in complete silence, feeling tension swirl inside me, mixed with stubborn satisfaction. The phone continued to vibrate, like a living being demanding my attention, but I didn't give in. I already knew what words would come out of the phone as soon as I answered. Reproaches, accusations, pleas, maybe even tears. A whole set of familiar techniques that Sabrina and Mom resorted to when they needed to get something from me. But I decided that I would not let them manipulate me anymore. The sun was already setting below the horizon when I heard a car pull up in front of the house. A moment later, there was a dull, demanding knock on the door. Pamela. Sabrina's voice was high-pitched, high-strung, and even through the closed door, I could hear the genuine rage vibrating in it. I stood up calmly, walked slowly to the door and turned the lock. As soon as the door opened, Sabrina rushed in, her eyes burning, her cheeks flushed. Tom stood behind her, arms folded, his expression one of silent disapproval. "What the hell did you do?" Sabrina shouted, waving her arms. "Where are our things? Where are our things, Pamela?" I calmly pointed towards the garage. "There. Everything is neatly packed and ready for export." She froze for a moment, as if she couldn't believe what was happening, then darted towards the garage, opened its doors and froze, looking at the neatly stacked boxes. Are you serious?" Her voice was trembling. "You just packed up all our stuff and threw us out." "I warned you, Sabrina," I said, crossing my arms over my chest. "You've had 6 months, even more. And what have you done in that time? No way. You and Tom continued to live here like in a hotel. You didn't pay rent, you didn't help with the bills, and then when the deadline expired, you just decided that you could stay forever. But this is my home, and I'm tired." She looked at me, full of shock, disappointment, and then contempt. "You're cruel, Pamela," she hissed. "A cold, heartless creature." I felt something like pain rise in my chest, but I immediately suppressed this feeling. I'm just a person who doesn't allow himself to be used anymore. Sabrina abruptly turned away, exhaling loudly, and put her hands on her hips, as if trying to pull herself together. Tom approached her, gently touched her shoulder, but she abruptly shook off his hand. His voice was hoarse, but not as emotional as Sabrina's. He was frowning at me, but there was no surprise in his gaze, as if he knew it would end there. "You're acting like a stranger, not a sister." "Did you act like my brother?" I shook my head. "You both thought you could just settle here and live off me, and now you're making a villain out of me because I wouldn't let you use me anymore." He clenched his jaw, but didn't answer. Sabrina suddenly turned around and stepped so close to me that there were only a few centimeters left between us. "You're going to regret this, Pamela." Her voice was low but filled with anger. "You will be left alone in this house, with your boring life, without family, without love. You're pathetic." I blinked slowly. "Maybe, Sabrina, but at least I have my own house." Her face contorted with anger, but she didn't say anything. She turned around, walked past Tom, and headed for the car. He paused for a second, looked at me with an expression of something like regret, but then silently followed. I stood on the doorstep, watching them load the boxes into the trunk and into the back seat. Sabrina didn't even look at me as she got into the car. Tom got behind the wheel and started the engine. "They're gone." I closed the door, and the house became quiet. It's really, amazingly, goosebumps quiet. I went into the living room, sat down on the couch, and closed my eyes. A spark of guilt burned inside me. Somewhere far away in the back of my mind, our mother's voice was repeating reproachfully, "She's your sister, Pamela. You can't do that to her." But that voice no longer had any power over me. I finally did what I should have done a long time ago. I chose myself. I didn't even doubt that Mom would not leave everything as it is. She's not the type to let things calm down, especially when it comes to Sabrina. I knew she would be telling her side of the story. And of course, this version would make me a heartless monster who had kicked my own sister and nieces out on the street. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. The first messages were from Aunt Mary, who was usually only interested in her own affairs, but now, apparently, decided to prove herself as a guardian of family values. "Pamela, how could you? It's your sister." Then there was Lily's cousin, whom I hadn't spoken to in over 5 years. "I just need to understand. Did you really just throw them out like trash?" Of course, this was followed by a call from Uncle Robert, a man who always believed that women should be gentle and compliant. "You know, Pamela, sometimes in life you have to put family first." "Robert," I interrupted, losing my patience, "you don't even know the whole story." "I don't need to know," he replied reproachfully. "You've done something cruel, and you should realize that." I ended the call. But the most interesting thing was waiting for me on social media. Sabrina, of course, did not miss the opportunity to play the victim. Her post was carefully thought out and emotionally charged. Today I realize that some people, even those closest to you, are capable of betraying you in the most difficult moment. We always helped each other, but when it came time to ask for help, we were just thrown away like unnecessary trash. Where is the humanity? Where is the compassion? Where is the real family? There was a lot of support in the comments. "Oh my God, Sabrina, this is terrible. How come? How can you expel your own sister? People have become so selfish." "Hold on, dear. Karma will put everything in its place." I gritted my teeth as I stared at the screen. Not a word about the fact that I sheltered them for 6 months. Not a word about them using my money, cheating me, spending it on expensive dinners while I was taking care of their children. I took a deep breath and put the phone away. I wasn't going to make excuses, but the consequences continued to snowball. A week later, Mom called again. "You have to talk to her, Pamela," she said, skipping even the greeting. "She is depressed. The children are scared. You have brought them to a terrible state." "Brought them to this state?" I repeated slowly. "No, Mom. She's the one who brought herself to this state. She was the one who made the decisions that brought everything crashing down." "It's not that simple. You don't understand," Mom insisted. "Sabrina is just trusting. She believes in the best in people." "No, Mom. She's not trusting. She's irresponsible." There was a tense silence. "When did you become so cruel?" Finally, she whispered. "When I was forced to support 2 adults who didn't even consider it necessary to pay their share of the bills," I replied in a flat voice. "When I realized that they were never going to leave. When I saw how, instead of supporting me, you were rushing to save Sabrina again." "She's your sister," Mom's voice was shaking. "And I'm your daughter," I gritted my teeth. "But you don't see it, do you?" Mom was silent. "I'm not going to talk about it anymore," I said, feeling tired. "Sabrina made her choice and I made mine, it's all." "You're going to regret this." Mom's voice was cold. I didn't answer anymore and just hung up. The next few weeks were quiet after the storm. No one else called. Sabrina didn't try to get in touch again. Mom stopped writing, and even her passive-aggressive comments in the family chat disappeared. I was finally living alone, and it was weird. I was used to the noise, to the chaos they created. I got used to the irritation, the stress, the anger that boiled inside me while they were here. But now there was only an echo in the empty house, a silence I didn't know what to do with. I was cooking dinner, and for the first time in 6 months, I enjoyed being able to eat it in complete silence. I read books without being distracted by endless conversations. I was taking a bath, and I didn't hear anyone slamming doors or laughing in the living room. But despite that, something inside me still wouldn't let go. Sometimes in the evenings, I found myself thinking that I was waiting for a call, that I was waiting for Sabrina to appear on the doorstep again, that I was waiting for my mother to send another accusatory message. But nothing happened. And gradually the silence stopped being ominous. She became comfortable. But one day, late at night, I heard a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat. I approached slowly, tensing up, already anticipating who it was. I opened the door, and I saw Sabrina. She stood in front of me, her eyes glazed over, her face devoid of any trace of her former confidence. "Pamela," her voice was weak. I looked at her, waiting for what she would say next. "I have nowhere else to go." I was silent. At that moment, I had a choice, and I knew that I would do it right this time. When I realized that I could no longer continue this pointless struggle to justify myself, I decided to leave everything as it is. It was hard because I used to be the one who always makes excuses, always tries to convey her truth, especially in the family. I spent hours talking to my aunts, uncles, and cousins, telling them in detail about the 6 months that had been a real ordeal for me, the financial difficulties we shared, the broken promises, and how I endlessly looked after the children, trying to be a good sister and a good daughter. But all the words were lost in the void. I was talking, and it was like talking to a wall because they had already decided everything. Their opinion was formed based on the story of my mother, who made me a cruel, evil sister who kicked her family out on the street. In the end, I just stopped trying. Let them think what they want. I got my life back, and it was worth a lot more than their approval. I was no longer ready to sacrifice myself for others. A month later, when I had calmed down a bit, the sound of the phone appeared in my life again. This time it was a call from Rachel. She was always the one who could cheer me up even in the most difficult moments. I picked up the phone and heard her almost uncontrollable laughter. "You won't believe this," she said, trying not to burst out laughing. "Your parents kicked Sabrina out? It turned out that your mom couldn't handle it anymore. She said that they consider her house to be a hotel, that they never help and all that. That sounds familiar, doesn't it?" I couldn't help but laugh. I've been coping with this for 6 months, trying to be polite and tolerant, and my parents couldn't even stand it for a month. But the funny thing was that I knew how they would feel. Mom always imagined herself to be strong, but in reality she was, like me, a person who could be on the edge if she was constantly pressured. Rachel's laughter died down, and she continued. "That's not all. Imagine Sabrina and Tom found an apartment. But here's what happened to them. They're now investing in some kind of space startup. Yes, you heard right. Sabrina goes to all the relatives, urging them to invest. She is sure that this will make her rich, that she will soon buy a house twice as big as yours. Can you imagine?" I felt a strange mix of emotions. Disappointment, pity, but something in these feelings was also relief. I knew that they would not change, but I also knew that I had gotten rid of this painful attachment. I no longer felt obligated to save them from their own mistakes. "Are you serious?" I asked, still not believing these words. "Do they really believe that?" "Oh, yeah, and you know what?" She began to tell me that this was not just a startup, but an opportunity on the ground floor. Something with space mining or some other nonsense that she finds so attractive. I even felt a little weird when she brought me a presentation about it. I tried to figure out how it could work, but it all looked like complete nonsense. I felt relieved that I had escaped in time, before I could be dragged into another of their schemes. This money, these illusions, I realized a long time ago that none of this makes sense, and I don't want to be a part of their desperate attempts. "Listen," I said to Rachel, "thanks for telling me, but I don't talk to them anymore. Sometimes I miss my nieces, but this distance is necessary." I tried to be objective, but sometimes these pangs of nostalgia still penetrated me. At some point, I still checked their social networks, watching their lives, as Sabrina continues to post about her investment opportunities and dreams of future wealth. It was strange. I wanted to think that all this was just temporary insanity, that she would realize her mistake, but in fact, I could no longer bring myself to believe it. As for Mom, we haven't spoken since that evening. She kept spreading her version of events, and at some point I didn't care anymore. However, a few weeks later I heard something interesting from Jessica, who has always been a family gossip girl, but this time her words sounded like a strange outlet. "You won't believe this, Pamela," she said into my phone. "Actually, your mom was at Aunt Linda's last week, and she still stood up for you. She said that now she understands why you did what you did. Listen, she even admitted how hard it is to live with someone who doesn't respect your boundaries." I felt the weight on my shoulders ease a little. "Sometimes people need to experience it for themselves to understand what you're talking about," I said, trying to hide a smile. In response, Jessica laughed too. "Yes, exactly. Who would have thought that your mom would finally understand?" And even though I didn't know what I was going to do next, I felt that this moment of change was on the horizon. Mom may eventually change, but I realized one thing. If that happens, I'll be there for her. But this time, Everything will be on my terms.